This is Matt Kundle's Hot Air Podcast.
Okay, I'm going back in time. I'm going to speak with Clare Newman. She lives in Edmonton and has a few businesses. Right. She moved to St. Albert. She lives in St. Albert and has a few businesses. Follow me. She's a yoga teacher. She knows reiki, aromatherapy. She does prenatal yoga and a whole lot more. But back in the 90s when I knew her, she was working for Polygram and later Universal Music. Her job was driving around bands and making sure they showed up at the radio station on time. Also, she would go to stores like HMV and make sure that the product was stocked with enough CDs that would be prominently displayed in the window. Apparently afterwards, she started work as a private investigator, and then she drifted sideways, but spiritually upward towards yoga. Now, there's always a story behind that. This episode's going to have a lot of yoga talk and personal journey stuff, and if that's not your thing, I'll save you the half hour and you can find something else. But if you're into life transformation, this might be cool. So when did you get into yoga? When was your first yoga class and how'd you feel afterwards?
So my first yoga class was in 99. So can you believe it? 20 years ago. That's how long I've been practicing. And I actually have a fracture on both parts of my L5. So I was trying to avoid surgery, and it was my physiotherapist who recommended yoga of all things. And I wasn't naturally a flexible person. I was just trying to heal an injury without having to go to surgery. So I started a Bikram class, and back 20 years ago, Bikram was still kind of underground yoga. It was kind of neat. It was like this small studio space. There were like 8 mats. She used like kettles to create sort of humidity in the room, or heat, and then just kind of pumped up the temperature. It was kind of funny when I think back now. And so I first started in Bikram just to allow more flexibility and for me to try to heal this injury.
And when did you decide to become a yoga teacher or instructor?
The private investigation business was pretty hard, kind of physically on me, and I was getting older and I wanted to move out of the field. And I had been practicing quite a lot of yoga at that point. So I knew that that was a direction that I wanted to take. I really loved the entire practice of yoga. You know, I think like many people who take their teacher trainings, at some point my life was falling apart. And I decided to go into a yoga teacher training to kind of heal more of the emotional and spiritual aspects of my life. So that happened in 2004. And I graduated from my program in 2005.
So when people say their life is falling apart, that generally comes with a divorce. Did that happen?
Yeah, that was happening. My marriage, I got married quite young to my first husband. I made this joke the other day because someone then, when I say I have my first husband, they then ask, well, how many husbands do you have? And I always joke and say I have 7, but it's not true. So this is my first, yeah. And my relationship was falling apart. My mom fell really ill. I just felt like I was in this high stress job. I just felt like, I needed something to keep me more grounded. So I enrolled in a training. I had to drive to Calgary because there wasn't anything at that time offered in Edmonton. So I was driving down there every weekend to take this program for a year and a bit, which was intense.
And what about the business? So when did the business come together and what did the business first look like when you started it?
Right after I took my teacher training, so in 2005, I started teaching full-time right away. I had quit my, what I like to call my career job. So I quit my career job to become a yoga instructor, and I had to fulfill my obligations of an income. And in 2005, the yoga community was very different. There was a lot of studios and not a lot of yoga instructors. So at that point, I was teaching 24 classes a week, which I would never do again. It was a lot of work. So my business, self-employment at that point. And yeah, I was teaching classes, 3-4 classes a day, every day, 7 days a week, and different styles of classes, which was great. So that's when it began. I evolved my business in yoga several times over the past 14 years, but that was the initial creation.
And that actually explains why you are a specialist in so many different fields of yoga. So I'm just going to throw them out there because you seem to have dipped your toe into every swimming pool in the neighborhood. So let's start with the benefits of prenatal yoga. You seem to know a lot when it comes to carrying a baby and doing yoga at the same time and understanding the benefits. What is Mamata Yoga?
So Mamata Yoga I created in 2011, and I was pregnant with my second child at the time. And I'm not a huge fan sometimes of Deepak Chopra, but every once in a while he he writes a really empowering book. And one was called Magical Beginnings, Enchanted Lives. So it was about this spiritual connection with women when they're pregnant and carrying babies. So of course, I read this book. I was so inspired by it that I created this prenatal and postnatal yoga teacher training, which at that time, again, in 2011, it hadn't existed yet, at least in North America. So I created a program. It had always been my focus. I really loved teaching prenatal yoga. I taught it through, yoga throughout all my pregnancies. I started a really large community here of a pre and postnatal community. So it's always been something that I've been really passionate about, but I turned it into a business just to help other yoga instructors feel more confident when pregnant women would come into a yoga class. Because that's oftentimes the case where I get, dozens of emails every day with teachers panicking that they don't have a prenatal training and how they could modify for this particular student. And so that's sort of what, created Mama to Yoga. And now it's a global training. So I have an online training where I train women all over the world, like mostly yoga instructors, but also women in the birthing community.
That's just 9 months that really involves a pregnancy and yoga, but there's a whole bunch more that must go with it, including people who have trouble conceiving, for instance.
Yeah, there is sort of a fertility component. It's not something that I specialize in. There's lots of other women, especially in our community, that focus on fertility yoga for sure. And that just requires a lot of, mostly that particular program is based on meditation, kind of working through the emotional fears about being a parent sometimes, lots of restorative poses. So it's not a very high functioning class. It's oftentimes very restorative or sort of yin based, but that's definitely one component is the fertility aspect. Moving into postnatal, there's also sort of labor and delivery classes too, where we prepare couples more of on a spiritual, emotional level to move towards labor and delivery as a partnership. And then, of course, on the other spectrum of that is postpartum. So when women have babies, they're coming back to yoga with their babies or creating some sort of a meditation practice in order to help heal, postpartum, because being a mother is not an easy task. And especially when your body has gone through so much transition. Is that transition or trauma? Well, I guess it depends on the way in which you look at it. It can be a traumatic experience for sure. And there is a lot of birth trauma these days with women. Mostly, I think that, expectations don't go the way women like to try to control the way in which their birth happens sometimes. And so there's emotional trauma, there's spiritual trauma. Of course, there's physical trauma. If there was any kind of interventions, like a C-section or, forceps birth, of course, there's the physical traumas for sure. And it's definitely a little bit, it's been increasing over the past, at least when I've been in the birthing community for the past 14 or 15 years, watching the birth trauma rise with women having issues in their postpartum. But, not every birth is a traumatic birth. I didn't want to associate a negative connotation to the word trauma. I associate trauma with being sort of rapid change to the body. Definitely. Even the most healthiest of births, there is some trauma involved with the rapid change that comes to the body. I am not a doctor, but I will play one on this podcast. Okay, perfect. You were fairly open about this, I think, somewhere in one of your writings about the difficulty of conceiving. What do you tell somebody who's having trouble conceiving? Because everybody's got advice. Yeah. It's such a personal one. I mean, I've worked with women one-on-one when they've come to me, kind of questions certainly about conception and fertility. There's so many different concepts around why a particular person, is having fertility issues. I don't like to call it infertility, but I'll say fertility issues. And so, I believe that we're kind of linked on this emotional, spiritual level too, and that whatever manifests in our body is a direct relationship to what's manifesting in our mind. So the first thing I always ask a woman when they're dealing with infertility issues is sort of what's happening emotionally in their life. Like, is there a lot of stress? Is there some challenges in the relationship? Really one powerful question to ask is, why do you want to be a mother? And that's always a really interesting question. I can always kind of direct a mother from their answer from there, because really what is, why do they want to become a mother? Some just feel like it's an obligation. It's the next step after they get married, and others maybe in a relationship where they actually don't want to become a mother. Then of course there's the physical issues, with what's happening intrinsically in their body. But coming from an Ayurvedic perspective, which is sort of the medicine of, of yoga and health, they believe that there's this psycho-spiritual and emotional and mental disruption with fertility. It's not the same here in the West, but it's definitely the philosophy more so in the East.
So I'm a dream therapist.
Are you?
Not really. But I analyze my dreams, and I've studied a lot about Carl Jung and how to interpret dreams. So if you were to bring me a dream, I would be able to interpret it for you, and we could sit down and work through it and get you to where you need to go for the day, as I like to say. I know. So
this is fun. I did not know. You know that I'm actually taking, I'm in my second year of shamanic training. So I'm all about, dream therapy and dream journaling. So yeah, we can have a pretty interesting talk about that, Matt.
Well, you send me a dream, I'll analyze it for you, and I'll tell you exactly how you're all messed up for today.
I don't know. I think that you should send me the dream, and then I'll tell you, and then we'll do a journey together. I'll drum journey, and we'll figure all that stuff out.
I can do that. Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things that I started to get into as well with the dream therapy was I began to understand a little bit about meditation and yoga nidra. So could you separate those two for me and tell me what the difference is between the two?
Meditation is generally, there's sort of 8 steps in the philosophy or the practice of yoga. So asana, which is the physical postures, that's only one of sort of 8 steps, meditation being the 7th, and then samadhi, enlightenment, being the 8th. So meditation is when we get into a space where we can sit down and we're not focusing on the fluctuations of the mind, right? That monkey mind that kind of goes on and on, especially what plagues us, I think, in our society. So meditation is the ability to sit in the space where there's no thoughts disrupting your patterns. And this is generally a quiet space, seated or laying down, but that you're not, you're awake, but you're not focusing on your thoughts. More of the awareness is on the breath. Yoga Nidra is a little bit different. It's still a meditative practice, but what they focus on is something called the rotation of consciousness. And so the rotation of consciousness is awareness of your entire physical body. And it's done quite quickly so that we don't allow thoughts to come in. And then there's an aspect to where we're working with the breath, and then we're working with visualizations. So what Yoga Nidra does is it moves you into the dream and the wake state, right in between. And generally it's said that Nidra simply means sleep. So generally 1 hour of your practice of Yoga Nidra accounts to feeling as though the physical body has gone through 4 hours of sleep. So Yoga Nidra is quite popular right now, something else called iRest. And it's just to try to help people who are dealing with, that inability to fall asleep or that inability to calm the mind, people who are dealing with high stress. There's a lot of research right now on Yoga Nidra and PTSD. So it's really helpful for first responders and people working in a high stress job. And again, it's just getting to this place where you can allow your thoughts to move into 1 to 4 thoughts a second versus 5 to 12, which is pretty common right now. So a little bit of, they're both meditation practices, but there is a little bit of separation and distinction between the two.
I didn't even know this, but when I was 25, I started to do a Saturday afternoon nap. And about 3:30, I'd lie down with some newspapers, and then I'd throw those aside. And then I would just close my eyes, and I would move off. And of course, I'm having a nap, according to everybody around me. But the truth was I was moving into a state of Yoga Nidra. I'd be down for an hour, and then I would come back to. And it really did feel like I had 4 hours of sleep.
Did it really, honestly?
Yeah, it wasn't sleep. It was me just staying calm with thoughts and letting go of the week that had passed. And every Saturday, 3:30, like clockwork, that's what I do.
That's pretty amazing.
I did notice if I didn't have that 1 hour practice of Yoga Nidra, that the next week was a lot more stressful. I just needed it to sort of reset myself.
Yeah, that power, the entire meditation or Yoga Nidra practice is really quite powerful. I think that meditation, there's a lot of misconceptions about it. It's quite a challenging practice, but sometimes you can start really small by just sitting in a quiet space, closing your eyes for 5 minutes and just focusing on the breath. It doesn't have to be, sitting in this really uncomfortable physical posture like lotus and quieting the mind for 45 minutes. It's sometimes really unrealistic, especially I'm a mom of 3 kids. My kids are still quite young. And my meditation, although I have a really strong meditation practice, it had to start really slow when I had children. So it went, it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day before they woke up and after they went to sleep. But it can be a really simple practice.
A lot of people confuse meditation with contemplation.
Yeah, they do.
There's a difference between the two. And a lot of people, I was meditating on this. I go, no, you weren't.
You're
contemplating.
That's definitely contemplation. Yeah. The practice of meditation is to not think about anything. So when you're thinking about a thought or a particular situation, that's definitely contemplation for sure.
You're also a Reiki master. How did you get into Reiki? Because when I was in Edmonton, I could find hardly any Reiki 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like all of the spiritual modalities make so much sense. I mean, I have a number. I'm one of those people that I'm constantly doing self-work and training. So the Reiki for me was just another added component into sort of my spiritual quest. But I took a training. Originally, I took a training in the city, and then I worked with a Reiki master online, and which was just more doable for my particular schedule. But we do actually have a really bustling Reiki community here. There's lots of trainings that are happening almost every weekend, and then there's different levels, and then eventually there's your master training. So I do have Reiki clients that come to my home, and I actually work with a lot of prenatal women, of course, and women in their postpartum stage. It's such a beautiful practice. I also do self-Reiki on myself every morning, even before I start a meditation practice. So it's just the ability to kind of focus again on healing physical injuries or ailments, moving chi and prana through the body. So that's the life-sustaining energy. It's just all about finding the balance.
Speaking of balance, I saw a picture on Instagram of you in a Pincha Marianasana, which is a forearm a forearm balance of sort, and you're X amount of months pregnant.
I was 36 weeks pregnant.
Wow. Is that even allowed?
So, I mean, it's not something that I advertise in terms of letting, I never practice inversions, or I never teach inversions in prenatal classes, because, a lot of women that are coming to prenatal classes they don't have a lot of experience. I've been practicing yoga for 20 years. So, I know my body really well. I had really great pregnancies. I had a lot of strength when I was pregnant, as you can see. So balancing on my forearms in an inverted posture is obviously, requires a lot of strength, but it's not something that I ever teach or recommend to women when they're pregnant. If they're instructors and they know their body and there's no challenges within their pregnancy, it can be a very safe pose to do, but it's a very advanced posture. So.
Oh, no, it's a posture I love, because there are days I can nail it, and then there are other days I cannot do it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I love arm balances. I'm an arm balance junkie for sure. So I did all of those poses when I was pregnant. The only one I didn't do was shoulder stand, because that wasn't really great, but. Yeah.
I would guess that might feel uncomfortable.
Very much, yeah. Especially at 36 weeks pregnant.
So you're also an aromatherapist, which means you can specialize in all the different flavors of aromas and understand the benefits for us to get involved with aromas. So what do aromas offer us?
Matt, this is amazing. Thank you for doing all your homework.
Hey, listen, you ought to know this. I mean, you used to bring bands by the radio station. And can you imagine if I did an interview with a band and I didn't even know who they were? I mean, how embarrassing is that for you?
Completely. I know.
I've gone in unprepared at times, so you've got to be prepared for these things.
You do, and thank you so much. Thank you. I'm a clinical aromatherapist, so I work with essential oils. And again, that started just out of the pre and postnatal cautions, like wanting to understand which essential oils were safe during pregnancy, because I also had a line of products called Mamata Holistics that I sold for moms. So moms during pregnancy, labor, postpartum, and then I had a baby's line. So I needed to understand which essential oils were contraindicated during pregnancy and postpartum and with babies. So I don't have a lot of clients with it. That was just mostly taking my certification in order to create a line of products that were really safe for moms. But aromatherapy, has lots of benefits. that one's a little bit more complicated because the world of aromatherapy, although it's very popular right now, it's considered organic chemistry. Like I had to take, a 400-hour program in order to become a clinical aromatherapist. So it's not easy. Like I think that people kind of throw out oils willy-nilly, but there's a lot of contraindications to oils, especially with specific ailments. So anytime people are working with oils, I always just suggest to them that they do their homework on the oil to make sure that there's no contraindications for whatever they're trying to use it for. But there is a lot of power, of course. It's all, herb-based, and there's a lot of essential oil companies out there that are a bit more fraudulent, and their claims are a little challenging for me, but it's such a beautiful world. So,
well, I don't mind throwing one out there because one of the things I discovered in 2003 is peppermint. And so, me, soccer player, and I, drag around in my bag, and I'd always be injured. When you're in your 30s and you're still playing soccer, you're going to get injured. And I found that peppermint oil and putting that on some of the more tender spots, whether it was ligaments that were stretched or muscles that were stretched, the natural peppermint was way better than the junk that you could get in the pharmacy, such as, the stuff that really stinks, like Tiger Balm and all that other stuff. And natural peppermint has wonderful healing powers for muscles. I just can't explain it, to the point where I just carry it around in my bag all the time. Right.
Yeah, so peppermint, a lot of the mint families are bringing sort of, oxygenated blood to the muscles. So that's why it's such has so many healing propensities for muscle aches and pains. Are you using the Japanese oil?
It was Swiss.
That's okay. I'm not sure. Yeah, peppermint's a great one especially for muscle spasms. Another really great one is marjoram, believe it or not.
Really?
That's one of my preferences to suggest for muscle spasms or aches and pains, sore muscles. Yeah.
All over it. Going to the store right now.
Are you? I can always ship you some.
Really?
Yeah, I actually make a muscle mend. It's like a natural Tiger Balm.
I can't even tell you about the pain that I'm going through right now because I think I've got mouseitis because I sit in front of a computer all day making podcasts. And now my neck and my shoulders all out of whack.
Not good, but you are practicing yoga, so you should be feeling a little bit better.
Oh, it took minute 50 of a 60-minute practice before I started to feel good again.
Okay.
Insane. I'm telling you, the computer and the mouse, it's winning the war every day.
It is, hey?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to move into becoming a yoga instructor, Matt. Have you ever thought about that?
I can't do it. I feel I've done enough yoga, and I'm practicing with these great people, and who are all teachers themselves. Like they all train, and they've all trained together. They've all got their 500 hours, and they all work together. And I feel I've hung around them enough that I've got a very, very good head start. But I think the minute I start to teach it, I'll lose my recluse, my place where I need to go to be a student, to continue to be a student. I take it too seriously.
Do you?
I'd wind up taking it too seriously. I need to, it has to be sort of like my turn-off point.
That's the conundrum, taking the yoga practice too seriously.
Yeah, I'd be very good at it, but I might be too good for myself.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. I mean, that is one of the challenges as an instructor, is that you end up teaching so much that your personal practice gets pushed aside. Every yoga instructor will always kind of complain about that. Like when I was teaching 24 classes a week, I didn't have time for a personal practice anymore.
But you do have time for a podcast because you've got the Mindful Mess podcast. What is this all about?
This is my new baby.
You're up to four babies now.
3 physical babies, and then I have a multitude of small businesses here and there. But this is my latest venture. 2019 for me was really about putting forth my creations in actions. I keep saying that because it's a really common one for me. So I'm a dreamer. I dream. I'm very creative, very passionate with the things that I do. I've always wanted to do a podcast, and last year I think it crossed my mind hundreds of times, and I never sort of pushed forward to do it. So this year I just was like, I'm going to do it. And the Mindful Mess came up for me because it's sort of, a really good indication of what my life represents. I'm, a yoga instructor. spiritual sort of practitioner. I'm always kind of moving into these modalities of healing, and that's the mindful piece. But then, the mess is just I'm a single mom of 3 small kids, so it's challenging. And running businesses and working from home and, scheduling and being a mom and trying to live this very spiritual life. So that's how the Mindful Mess podcast came about. And I run enough yoga trainings throughout the year where I was having these really profound, deep conversations with my friends and with other yoga instructors. And I just thought that all of this information is so valuable to so many people. So I just decided that, I was going to create it. And so I started just a couple weeks ago, and I love it. Like, I absolutely love it.
So I think back to you and your passion for music. You got into the music business at a younger age. And so have you maintained your connection to music, and what's it like today?
I started in the yoga or the music business when I was 16, working at a retailer. So I worked at HMV throughout my high school years. And then I got a job with Polygram I think I was like 19. I was quite young still, which then we merged very shortly with Universal. So the music industry has always been something that I love. Music is huge for me and my children and my family. And I'm still involved, of course, in the community as much as I can be. But once I left Universal to pursue other things, as the music industries, kind of shifted and changed, I just started to pursue other things. But if music is daily for me. My children and I still, we have a dance party every night right after dinner. It's kind of funny. It's just something that we do. I'm constantly on iTunes looking for new music, and I always have my beats on, my headphones on, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, if I'm walking or at the gym. So, of course, music is very inspiring. It's also can be quite meditative, too, when you find some really soft, soothing music. I have the tendency to make up playlists when I teach yoga. I'm really involved in creating really cool playlists for classes because I think that's a really great experience. So even though I'm not in the industry anymore, I still see some of the people that I used to work with. But yeah, of course, music is part of my soul for sure.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for.
Was it?
Yeah. Claire, thank you so much for telling me about your life. I haven't seen you in about 20 years now. Miss you. But it's so great to see that you're doing this, and that you're doing yoga, and that I'm doing yoga, and
weird.
And now we have all this stuff to talk about.
We do. This is great. So the next time you're here, you have to contact me. We'll go to a yoga class together, and I'll give you some oils and a little reiki, Matt. Fix you right up.
God, if my Edmonton friends found out I got into the yoga thing.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
The Hot Air Podcast. For more, including show notes and links, go to hotairpodcast.com and wherever great social media is found. A production of the Sound Off Media Company.